Art back in the early 1900s was beautiful. After all, if you went to somewhere like the Paris Salon, you could see paintings and portraits in which are ornaments. And then to your left, you'd see a urinal. That toilet is a representation of a movement in art called data art, pioneered by Marcel Duchamp, who dared to challenge the stereotypes of art after World War I, challenging what is peace, and maybe peace can be kept if we're disorganized. It's simply for Marcel Duchamp's ambition to change the status quo that echoes today's quotation. In every battle, there comes a time when both sides consider themselves beaten, then he who continues the attack wins. Telling ourselves that even when we are defeated, as long as we can push forward with our ambitions and our goals, then at the end of the day, we can succeed. We agree with the quotation for two reasons. First, because what's unachievable doesn't really exist. And second, because ambition is needed to live. But first, what's unachievable doesn't really exist. Sometimes we think things are impossible, whether it's getting the partner of our dreams or our parents being good cooks. Primarily, we agree for the following first reason that the unachievable doesn't exist. And we can look at two main examples. First, Edward Hall, the diplomat. And second, a karate sensei by the name of Johnny Lawrence. But first, let's turn our heads back to the 1940s in a very different era of the United States. It was pre-war, and frankly, Edward Hall was a man who very much didn't like the way that United States diplomacy operated. See, back then, it was ran by rich kids who only spoke English. Yeah, we had really good talks with China only in one language. Edward Hall didn't like that idea, and what he did was develop the Foreign Service Institute, an idea in which back in the 1940s was called crazy. But Edward Hall thought that if he could teach Americans to speak different languages, then therefore diplomacy in the United States could expand. That's exactly what happened. And people that thought that idea was impossible and unachievable was set to be true in reality by Edward Hall. Second, let's turn our heads over to Johnny Lawrence, who, when we find him in the reboot of Cobra Kai in 2018, 30 years after the original Karate Kid, Lawrence is a mess. He's drunk, he's lost connections with his kids, but he refines karate. And in refining karate, he does something impossible in making sure that a previously thought of violent karate dojo such as Cobra Kai has a positive reputation, because he takes on chance on nerds in which nobody likes and turns them into champions. These two stories fully showing that the unachievable doesn't exist, being the first reason why we agree with today's quotation. The second reason of why we agree with today's quotation is because ambition is needed to live. Because if we don't have anything that we want, then we're really not striving for anything in our lives. We can see this primarily through two examples. First, Antilanis, a Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist. And second, The Human Motor, written by Anson Rabinak. But first, let's turn our heads over to the Washington Post and previous employee Antilanis. Antilanis had a pretty good gig with the Washington Post. However, she resigned because her artwork of boss Jeff Bezos genuflecting to a statue of Donald Trump was rejected by the Post. But it's for the reason that Antilanis has the ambition to put out real art that has a meaning in this country that she quit, putting her goals over monetary values, even though there might be a battle over having a lack of money. But she chose the battle to quit the Washington Post, proving her ambition. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the words from Anson Rabinak in the novel, The Human Motor, ambition in the modern day era, is one in which strives to rework ambition into something that is needed in order to go forward. If we don't have a goal, then we're not really living life for anything. Simply put, Rabinak is advertising that as long as we have something to live for, then all of our steps on earth here are accounted for. These two anecdotes showing us an ambition is needed to live. Every every day we have battles, whether with other people or with the microwave. But at the end of the day, it's for the reason of human nature that we must come back to today's quotation. In every battle, there comes a time when both sides consider themselves beaten. Then who continues the attack wins. Ulysses S. Grant's words are some that we agree with and interpret to mean that we need to keep going forward because what we want is achievable. We agree because first, the unachievable doesn't exist. And second, ambition is needed to live. Maybe all of us need something ridiculous in our lives.